I just want to talk, Gannon. I just want to talk because I think I heard this week that he could be a contender for a head coaching job, which I think I'm not saying he's horrible. I'm just saying to be in the conversation for that, and people are giving him so much credit. And I think at times, credit is deserved, but most of the time I want to see more pressure. And yes, I know he said he doesn't have the personnel. John McMullen has told us he doesn't have the personnel he needs.
Welcome back, live post-game show on JAKIB Media YouTube channel, as well as 6abc.com. Welcome in. We're exclusively presented by Ocean Casino Resort. Book your summer of 2022 weekend at Ocean Casino. Book it now and go for the live shows. Go for the win. It will simply be a spectacular summer of 2022. Real quick update here for everybody. The 49ers and Texans are still scoreless. We're rooting for the 49ers to actually win that game. But I say, what the heck? Why not try to go for the 6th playoff seed instead? But the Eagles can clinch with a San Francisco win or a Panthers win, and then the Packers take care of business tonight against the Vikings. Trey Lance starting, in case you missed it, for the 49ers. Jimmy Garoppolo not active today. Trey Lance is your starter. He's 1 for 1 so far with about 7:20 left in the first quarter. So let's talk about, by the way, John McMullen will also be joining us from Lincoln Financial Field a little bit later in the show on the heels of the Eagles winning 20-16 over Washington and putting themselves in a position, at least for now, to clinch a playoff spot. And we all hope they do that. So looking at this Eagles defense today, we had talked a little bit earlier, Devan, about the Eagles defensive line. Fletcher Cox, obviously Josh Sweat getting into the backfield. Javon Hargrave trying to make some big plays as well. Jonathan Gannon, I did notice maybe two, to go back and look at it, maybe two odd man rushes, if you will, 5 men rushing instead of just 4 after the quarterback Taylor Heinicke in this game. But overall, it was more about the defensive line play. What would you have liked to have seen from Jonathan Gannon, especially as this game went on?
For me, I think, sorry, DGunn, did you want to go?
No.
Oh, no. This is Devin. The floor is yours.
I know he just looked like he was chomping at the bit to say
no.
something.
Considering you want to have a fireside chat with Jonathan Gannon, I don't want to get on your bad side, so you go first.
Look, I just want to talk, Gannon. I just want to talk because I think I heard this week that he could be a contender for a head coaching job, which I think I'm not saying he's horrible. I'm just saying to be in the conversation for that, and people are giving him so much credit. And I think at times, credit is deserved, but most of the time I want to see more pressure. And yes, I know he said he doesn't have the personnel. John McMullen has told us he doesn't have the personnel he needs, but linebackers, still a problem. Speed, still a problem. Our D-line, the last few weeks, I can't tell if they've gotten better. I know Fletcher Cox has definitely improved, or they're just going up against a really bad offense and quarterback. You know, Mark, I think you said it a few games ago where the Eagles don't play well, or at least Gannon doesn't plan ahead well for quarterbacks like Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes, quarterbacks he respects. And I don't know about Taylor Heinicke, if maybe that was an issue today, at least in the first half, but it's just a little passive for me. Like I thought Jim Short's defense was also passive. So I just haven't seen the aggression that I want to. I mean, we are making big plays, Rodney McLeod, thank goodness again, but I just think I want to see a little bit more pressure all around from Jonathan Gannon's defense.
First of all, the fact that Jonathan Gannon's name was even mentioned for a head coaching job right now, that's his agent putting that stuff out there. Anybody who would hire Jonathan Gannon right now as a head coach based on what he's done this year, that could cost somebody a job. I'm not saying he can't develop into a head coach material. I don't think he's there yet. And, you know, it looks great. You can't control who you play on your schedule, but you know, my goodness, if the Eagles had lost some of these games against the latter half of the schedule they've played, we'd be crying foul and wanting to burn down an Novacare complex. So he's found a way to get it done. But when I look at the overall defensive scheme that he plays, you play that kind of defense against the likes of a Brady, a Rodgers, and he'll shred that thing like cheese. You know, those quarterbacks, you've got to come up with something. You have to get even more creative. And I've said a lot of times I think he waits too long to decide what he's going to do. You know, I look at Miami, and Miami is the first team in the NFL ever to have a 7-game losing streak and a 7-game winning streak in the same season. The reason why they're on a 7-game winning streak, first and foremost, because Brian Flores unleashed the hounds. If you look at Brian Flores, it's like almost every down, he's got somebody coming from all kinds of angles, blitzing, putting pressure on quarterbacks. And the defense has won a lot of games for that offense that has put them in the playoff conversation. And I look at Miami's overall personnel and defense. I don't think it's any better than what the Eagles have, but it's how it's being utilized. And I think Jonathan Gannon sometimes has too much respect for the opposition instead of dictating the play. I think he lets the play dictate him instead of him dictating the play a lot of times. And then all of a sudden he'll come up with some key plays. But again, I need to see his defense and his scheme play against much better competition. What I've seen right now is good enough to get the job done against a Giants quarterback, a Jets quarterback, a Washington quarterback. But I want to see him do some of these things and more against the so-called elite quarterbacks in the NFC that are coming up when his team gets to the playoffs. And that's not a knock against Jonathan Gannon. To me, it's just an honest observation. It's from what I've seen. Kudos to him for being able to get the job done in certain situations. But his defense is all over the place. We don't know what he's playing. One week he's playing soft. Next week, the cornerbacks are playing up. You know what? What's your identity? What's your identity as a defense? You know.
Well, and sometimes it's the call, like when Washington had the ball right before the half. It seemed like they honestly were like, okay, the clock's running out, and there was no pass rush, and they were able to get another first down and then field goal, and that put them up even more. So it's things like that where it feels like he is reactive. It's reactive defense. They just kind of sit back and wait to see what happens and then react from there. And I just think, especially when the other team, what Washington was missing 3 offensive line starters, starting running back, quarterback, obviously. So it's scary if you have to go up against a full strength Dallas. You know, I don't think that we saw we weren't able to stop them earlier in the season. So scary.
Well, that'll be a huge test, depending on how that actually plays out next week. I expect that to be a big test for the Eagles if they do have to play that game, and the Cowboys also have to play that game. So that'll be a big test if both sides really need that victory. But here's what I'll say: 2 things. One, I want to point out, great name, Rigor Mortis, is hitting us up on the chat, saying that he hopes Jonathan Gannon gets a job somewhere else. And I think we all understand why.
Okay.
But the other thing to this is when you compare him to the Jim Schwartz's defense, one thing that Jim Schwartz, I don't think gets enough credit for in terms of the comparison to Jonathan Gannon. Yes, very true. Neither side liked to blitz. But at least Jim Schwartz had a defensive line structure that allowed aggression on every single play because he played the wide 9 a lot of the times. Jonathan Gannon doesn't even do that. Jonathan Gannon sits back and says, all right, front 4, go ahead and make a play, see what happens. And the phrase I have used throughout this entire season is you can force quarterbacks into making mistakes. Gunner, similar to what you were saying. When you play a guy like Daniel Jones, when you play the backups that you've seen against Washington, when you see games like that in front of you and you have the opportunity when you have quarterbacks like that in front of you to force them into mistakes, go ahead and do it. Now, they tried that against Taylor Heineke a couple of different times today, and by some divine inspiration or divine intervention, he was able to make a couple of different plays. One, he had, I think it was Alex Singleton right in his face, taking him to the ground, and he was able to lob it right over the defensive back. I think it was the one player, or Steven Nelson later in that game that you saw him actually beat the blitz on. But everything else really came down to the defensive line making plays for this team. This was a game where they could go eat, essentially. I don't think it was a matter of anything great Jonathan Gannon did schematically. The second half, I think they simply got home more. You saw Washington. This was interesting. Washington increased their screens in the second half, it looked like, meaning they were trying to get the Eagles to over pursue, so that when Jonathan Gannon, when he did call a rare aggressive play call, and I use that term loosely, they were able to try to use the Eagles over pursuit against them. To their credit, a lot of times, either TJ Edwards or Alex Singleton were actually staying back. They were staying home, in other words, to protect against that particular play. And I thought that was a great job of just discipline, which does give a little bit of a hat tip to coaching. But overall, they were trying to catch the Eagles' defensive line over pursuing in the backfield by beating them with screen plays, which really did not work in their favor in the second half, which is why the Eagles were able to pitch a shutout in that second half. But when it comes overall to aggression, one thing I always think does get left out is that wide 9 factor when comparing Jim Schwartz to Jonathan Gannon. But look, they did what they were supposed to do against an inferior team. Did Washington have a few chips on their shoulder? They absolutely did. But the Eagles did what they needed to do in this football game, which was not only win it, but take control when they needed to do that when it mattered most, which was the second half of this game. To go back to the offense real quick, at what point is Boston Scott just going to be the number 2 guy, if not the number 1? I mean, he looked like the number 1 guy tonight, or today, this afternoon, I should say. But it looks like that should really be his role going forward. Jordan Howard, they didn't use as a number 1 back today for the most part. Miles Sanders, what, you think Gunner at least another week?
Possibly. It depends on the latest amount of X-rays and what it shows in terms of whether or not they can put some kind of protective device on that hand to keep it from doing further damage, which could affect his availability for the playoffs. If they're in the playoffs today, I don't know if I'd even play Miles Sanders next week. You're going to need him more, so you're going to need his overall repertoire of abilities in the passing and running game for that second season.
I agree.
And as much as you'd like to take down the Dallas Cowboys in a bigger scheme of things, what's more important? Having Miles Sanders available for Dallas if it doesn't affect their playoff positioning, or having him that much healthier hand-wise when the playoffs roll around. So even I don't think I'd touch him in terms of next week.
Right.
It'd be nice to get him back in the flow, but no.
And Nick Sirianni even said he compared it to Marlon Mack when he had him with the Colts. I think it was 2019. Marlon Mack had a hand injury, broken hand. He ended up missing 2 weeks. And Nick Sirianni compared the injury to that with Miles Sanders. So I would assume it would be 2 weeks as well. So, I wouldn't be opposed to him sitting out next week. But as of right now, I don't even think you would need him at this point. If you had to win next week, right? I'm sure Miles Sanders might be able to go for that game. But when it comes to the competition, if you will, between Jordan Howard maybe not being 100% right now and Boston Scott absolutely being 100%, it showed. The proof was in the pudding today as far as how they started out the game. Boston Scott, and rightfully so, I thought, was the Eagles' number 1 running back, and I'm not afraid to see that happen again going forward.
I think when Jordan Howard is fully healthy, I would argue that I would want him as my number 1. I mean, they're both incredible, and I like that we have options when guys go down. But Jordan Howard was clearly still shaken up from his stinger last week. So I think in terms of guys who need to step up when we need them, Boston Scott is incredible. As I said earlier in the show, I don't know if I'd go as far to say that I feel confident in him being a number 1 running back, though.
I do, as long because Jordan Howard has an injury right now that made him miss 5-6 weeks a couple of years ago. So I don't for him to even play in this particular game was wild to me. I'm okay. What I'm saying is I'm okay with Jordan Howard still taking his time and being that number 2 guy behind Boston Scott. Yeah.
Right. I mean, if no one else is healthy, then yes, absolutely. Boston Scott, number 1 guy.
But what I'm really saying is just nothing against Kenny Gainwell. He hasn't taken the reins as the Eagles had hoped he would in more of a predominant role in this offense.
I just think in Boston Scott's case, he's just caught in a numbers game here in Philadelphia. He's always going to be that number 3 back as long as Miles Sanders and Jordan Howard are here, because they complement each other. So where you have the game breaker in Miles Sanders, you have the battering ram of Jordan Howard. And when you look at the way the Eagles align their running game, it's built around those 2 type backs. You have one back who's a scat back who tries to wear defense down, and the other one tries to finish him off with his power running ability. And Boston Scott is like a combination of the 2. He's a smaller back, but he's very shifty. He can also lower his shoulder and knock a defender back, or would be tackler back. But because those 2 guys are in front of him, I don't think Boston Scott's role in this offense will be anything more than what it is right now.
Okay. Real quick, still scoreless, 49ers and Texans right now. We're rooting for the 49ers, unless you want the Eagles to have a shot at that, 6th playoff seed, but whatever. But also getting this from Jeff McClain after the game, Nick Sirianni apparently telling reporters this has to do with Jalen Hurts' ankle, which is still on the back of my mind. I don't know if it is still for you guys, but Jalen Hurts said at one point Nick Sirianni said at one point Jalen Hurts looked at him during the game and said, whatever you need to call it.
Yeah.
So no, don't think about my ankle. I'll be fine. I got this. No worries. Now, it's not really descriptive as to whether or not Jalen Hurts is just trying to tough it out and still experiencing a lot of pain, or if it's just along the lines of Jalen Hurts is just 100%, and he doesn't want his coach trying to shy away from anything on the play sheet. I don't know how to interpret it just now, but all I know is bottom line is Jalen Hurts is ready to go, whether that's physically or that's mentally, just trying to tough out an ankle injury.
I'd be willing to bet that knowing Jalen Hurts and watching him throughout this season, that is mental. He's probably still in a little bit of pain, a little bit uncomfortable, and he was saying, it's fine. I'll push through it, whatever you need. Because, I mean, we see that. He does that game in and game out, and that's what's so impressive about him.
Mm-hmm. No, that it has really been impressive. Like, really, I know, Gunnar, you said it wasn't easy to narrow it down to one thing, but I think Nick Sirianni made a decision after the Raiders game and going into that Lions game, and we know the conversation, and to reference it one more time, the Jason Kelsey speech when he talked about watching things grow. I mean, if your mind doesn't flip right to flowers, man, woof, I don't know what. But he was talking about flowers, talking about growing. And after they dismantled the Detroit Lions like they should have, and we did the postgame show talking about how, hey, look, we understand it's the Lions, but they did what they were supposed to do. Prove you're not as bad as the Lions. And they did that. And ever since then, that root speech, ever since watching the flower grow, ever since the fertilizer, the Eagles have been playing much better football, and Nick Sirianni has been calling a much better game plan because he has decided to say, offensive line, Jeff Stoutland, you got us. We're going to run behind it. We're going to allow you guys to have great pass protection, but we're also going to call plays to put our quarterback in the best possible position to have success, and they did that again today. Now, the run game wasn't what it used to be. You pointed that earlier, Gunnar, but overall, this offense, you have seen that about face over the last 9 weeks of the season, really, and it has been a joy to watch that growth.
I think Jason Kelsey's speech spoke volumes to a lot of players, a lot of young players trying to find their way with his team, when basically he said, hey, I was a walk-on in Cincinnati. Nobody believed in me. He earned a scholarship. The word on him was he's too small to play center in the National Football League. The Eagles take a chance on him. Even in 2016, people were screaming, Doug Peterson's first year, you know what? You need to find a center. He's too small. He's being engulfed by these much bigger defensive tackles. And he talked about how, people wanted to give up on me, but Doug Peterson and his organization still had faith in him. And you look at where he is now, considered one of the best, if not the best center in the National Football League. Right now, he's obviously one of the smartest, most intelligent offensive lineman in the National Football League. And I think that spoke volumes to a lot of players in terms of just because people on the outside looking in think you can't, doesn't mean that you cannot achieve, great things. And right now this team, 2 games over 500, has achieved things that we never thought would be feasible at the start of the season in terms of being a playoff contender and one more win away from being a 10-win season in 2021. And what Jason basically is talking about is, if you don't believe in yourself, who else is going to believe in you? And I loved how he closed it when he said, when we play our game, when you do what you're supposed to do, nobody can bleep with us. Now, I think that's a little bit far-fetched, but, I understand what he's saying, trying to motivate these guys. You have to believe that no matter what the circumstance is, you can get it done. We can shock the world at any given moment. I get that, and I applaud Jason for that. If that man ran for political office, I don't care what party he ran for, I'd vote for him. I'd vote for Jason Kelsey no matter what. Mayor, congressman, senator, doesn't make a difference. I'd vote for Jason Kelsey just based on his speeches alone.
Well, I wouldn't even vote for him. I just want him to become like dictator of Philadelphia. I would go to a complete monarchy, king of Philadelphia. I would break off from the United. Yeah, right. I would break off from the United States as a whole and in the state of Pennsylvania and just live in Kelsadelphia. That's what I would live in. That's what I would live in. Maybe that's just me.
I actually tweeted this yesterday that I want to become mayor of Philadelphia so I can make it illegal for him to retire ever, because we need speeches like that. I mean, on such a young team, it's so important. And DGunn, you say if everyone plays 100%, the personnel, talent, maybe the Eagles wouldn't make it to the Super Bowl. But I do think where he's coming from is this is a new team. And when you can kind of take a step back and look at the fact that we're now 9-7, this season has been an emotional roller coaster. So he's not wrong in that this team does have crazy potential, because most of our talent, aside from guys like Jason Kelsey, are very young. Nick Sirianni's in his first year. I think he's been really impressive thus far. So I get what Jason Kelsey was putting down there for sure. I want to go back to Jalen Hurts for 1 second, and we can hopefully show this after the next break. But I don't know if you guys saw, he was almost injured again after the game because the stadium or FedEx Field, fans were trying to like give him a high five, and the barricade fell, and they fell onto Jalen Hurts as he was walking off the field.
That stadium is a dump.
Oh, it is a dump.
I hate that stadium more so than any other stadium in the National Football League.
That stadium almost took out our quarterback after the game. So, hopefully we can find that video, but had to get that one out there.
All right, I just retweeted it.
If that stadium had taken out Jalen Hurts, he'd have made more money off a lawsuit than he made so far in the National Football League as a player.
We will have it for people after the break. Now, this is what's amazing. Just to give people, it didn't fall directly on him. It like fell at his feet. So there was hardly any contact until the fans, and you'll see it, the fans that fell over just in front of Jalen Hurts get up, and Jalen Hurts immediately puts his arms around. And then security is rushing him off. And I think that was, as I'm looking at it, that's probably a good idea in the COVID era that we're in, unfortunately. But the security takes him away. I think he even took a selfie with a couple of people. So there you go. We will have that for you when we come back on live postgame show. But I do want to remind you, find people of Philadelphia watching on 6abc.com as well as the JAKIB Media YouTube page, that we are exclusively presented by Ocean Casino Resort. Book your summer of 2022 weekend at Ocean Casino. Book it now. Go for the live shows. Go for the win. You know the summer is going to be spectacular. More live post-game show when we return.